Actresses Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman carry a maximum sentence of 20 years and a $250,000 fine.
I'm also literally never at school, but I think my class doesn't even, and maybe they forget I go there.
She and her fashion designer husband are accused of paying $500,000 in bribes to have their daughters admitted to USC as part of the crew team.
Staging photos for students who never even played the sport.
In one example, in exchange for $400,000, Yale accepted an applicant as a recruit despite knowing that the applicant did not even play competitive soccer.
We believe everyone charged here today had a role in fostering a culture of corruption and greed that created an uneven playing field for students trying to get into these schools the right way.
We're talking about deception and fraud. Fake test scores, fake athletic credentials, fake photographs, bribed college officials.
This is not just, to me, is not just an admissions scandal. It's more broadly an indictment of our entire educational system.
The United States has a problem with higher education. We just can't seem to get it right.
I think you can make a reasonable case that the universities do more harm than good now.
But I do want the experience of like game days, partying. I don't really care about school, as you guys all know.
And while it's hard to sympathize, a majority of Americans know that the university system in place today is headed in the wrong direction.
Overall, they developed and they perpetuate a system that's tilted toward the wealthy and made this kind of corruption possible.
In a nation with a growing culture of elitism and a shrinking middle class, the wealthy and powerful have proven that they can buy their way into almost anything, and higher education is no exception. Now, it isn't just that rich and wealthy parents are able to do this for their kids, it's that colleges are allowing it to happen. Over the course of the last 20 years alone, the average full package tuition with room and board for an incoming college student attending a 4-year private university has skyrocketed from an average of $31,590 a year to about $48,510 a year. It's an increase of roughly 35%. And public schools have jumped about 43% from an average of $12,000 a year to $21,370. Keep in mind that as of right now, within the top 30 most highly competitive schools in the nation, only 5 are public schools. To put it into perspective, the average college graduate in the US makes about $50,000 a year, and it depends highly on where you're employed. And the median American wage is less at $45,000 a year. In fact, the price of college is increasing 8 times faster than wages right now. With college costs rising more and more, less and less people are able to afford putting their kids into a 4-year institution. To bridge this gap, students who still strive to go to these competitive colleges in hopes that it helps them jump from the middle or lower class up a level or two are forced to borrow money.
Basically, the year I was elected to Senate, the year before I became a U.S. Senator, was when we finished paying off all of our loans. Combined, Michelle and my bill was higher than our mortgage.
The average student in the United States graduates with about $37,000 in student debt. The national student debt is roughly $1.5 trillion.
Right now, student debt is actually higher than credit card debt.
There are 40 million people currently with student debt.
Yeah. So this is a massive generational challenge.
And just a side note, that $37,000 or however much a student borrowed to go to school will follow them until the day they die. And I have a hunch that this may very well be a strong contributing factor toward America's immensely growing wealth gap.
Since 1997, the income of the top 1% has grown 20 times the rest of us.
The middle class in America is shrinking at a rate faster than ever. And by the way, don't forget that as the price of college has increased, admissions rates are reaching an all-time low.
15 years ago, an Ivy League school might have admitted 20 or 25% of its applicants. Now it might be 5 or 10%. So it's ever harder to get in.
Very good schools, they were in the 20s. Now there are a lot of schools in the single digits.
Add that with the growing social pressure and employer expectation associated with getting a college education, there is no question that higher education in the United States has become a filtering game with an unequal playing field.
There's this idea that 18-year-olds are supposed to know what they want in life. And now that I'm turning 25 tomorrow, I still don't know exactly what's going on.
But how did it get this way? In order to fully understand where the impact and inequality associated with higher education stems from, we have to go back to where it all began. In 1636, Harvard University was founded as America's first college, created with the intent to advance learning and perpetuate it to posterity. Or in other words, promote learning for all future generations. Back then, college and higher education was a pretty exclusive club. Only 9 men graduated from the first class of 1642. Compare that to the near 4 million Americans who are expected to graduate in 2018.
The demographics of American higher education have been utterly transformed.
In 1944, the playing field was made more even by the GI Bill, which allowed veterans the opportunity to attend school. In just 3 years, half of all college students were veterans.
Tuition is taken care of, funds are provided for laboratory fees, books, supplies, and equipment are included.
You cannot underestimate the GI Bill. This educated an entire generation of men, and some women too, and it opened the doors. People who hadn't even thought that they might go to college. The GI Bill changed what American families could aspire to.
Even with these efforts, not everyone was given the same opportunities. Schools and banks still heavily discriminated against women and people of color, making it significantly harder for them to borrow money and attain a higher level education. In 1957, American higher education was kicked into high gear by the launch of Sputnik, a beach ball-sized satellite launched into space by the Soviet Union.
People were worried about this clash between the Soviet Union and the United States, and suddenly it was popular to study science and math. It was patriotic.
In the 1960s, the civil rights movement kept the ball rolling by dramatically helping these marginalized groups get better access to higher education. Back then, students who went to public school in California paid less than $1,000 in registration fees and no tuition if they were a resident of the state. Yet, these good times didn't last for long. In the 1970s came the taxpayer revolt.
So what happened was the student loan process exploded.
Then, in 1983, the US News and World Report magazine published its first ever national ranking of American academic institutions.
Within the conference rooms of admissions office and provost office across the land, I can assure you they pay very close attention to it. Every one of the criteria that US News used depended on name recognition, traditional quality, prestige, and most of all, wealth.
Now schools had a reason to do their best to outdo each other and attract the top students. All of this, alongside the rapid competitive growth of globalization and interconnectivity, led to a cultural demand that placed a significantly high value on higher education as a precursor to economic success. In the end, it's all really about people. Changing the culture we have in this country toward college and its value would require a dramatic shift in the way that we think about education as opposed to learning. But as of now, the fate of millions of students who apply to top schools every year lies in the hands of admissions officers. Admissions officers act as the gatekeepers.
You are evaluating and letting someone in based on paper.
We're making decisions that could impact kids' futures, not just the 4 years where they go to college, but all the networks that they establish.
You have to try to read between the lines and make really good decisions on the information that you're given.
When doing their job correctly and responsibly, they have the power to change lives and give students the opportunity to move up the social ladder, pursue their curiosities, and party their way to success.
We are not sort of old white men in frumpy coats with, the arm and elbow patches on our blazers. Very young folks who are excited about their work, who are getting together to make some tough decisions.
It's a tough job, but someone has to do it.
And the process of making those decisions is agonizing.
With so many worthy and competitive students, it becomes hard to distinguish what sets kids apart.
That girl who wants to study public policy, the one who volunteered on Hillary Clinton's campaign.
Just because you're a good kid, just because you get exceptional grades and you deserve an acceptance, doesn't mean you're going to get it.
Schools create guidelines for admissions officers to follow.
Harvard considers about 200 factors. Did your parents go to Ivy League schools? What % of your neighborhood speaks English? Are either of your parents deceased?
But as expected, This process is highly subjective and has been ridiculed and criticized in the past for discriminating against certain racial and ethnic groups.
All admissions officers, we all have personal biases based on how we grew up.
I had a soft spot for kids who were from poverty.
Neither of my parents went to college, and so I will always fight for those kids. I think they face an uphill battle in the selection process.
Kids who are interested in sort of making the world and their communities a better place. So all you have to do is, talk about sort of women's rights or the Student Diversity Leadership Conference. I was all over you, okay? I have a lot of biases.
We're people, and we all kind of gravitate towards our own personal experience.
While technical solutions like changing the guidelines for admissions officers, or lowering the cost of tuition, or looking at other countries who do a really good job already, or even just having schools accept students that more accurately reflect the nation's income and racial disparity would help tremendously, it's probably not going to happen, at least anytime soon.
I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. Remember, this doesn't involve the super rich. The super rich buy buildings. They don't have to worry about their kids getting in.
Also let you know, there's something called classism in this country.
You were really looking at 7-figure donations, 8-figure donations, but sometimes 6 figures plus a connection with someone on the board was even more powerful.
Unless we start looking at colleges like businesses, there's really not going to be enough change to really kind of turn the tides and really kind of give underrepresented students a really big platform.
The wealthy and powerful will most likely still be able to put their kids into top schools easily, and those who were accused in this scandal, and the many more to probably come, won't face the punishments they really deserve. In the end, they'll probably still be remembered as influential, successful people, and as time goes on, society forgets and forgives.
He thinks if enough time passes, this will blow over.
When something happens to somebody, when they're in a scandal, when there's a problem or whatever else, that snapshot at the worst moment almost never would be what is carried forward and the only thing remembered. It just isn't true.
But as young people living in this time period, it's our job and responsibility to remember these things.
Once you fill up your class with those institutional priorities, there isn't a whole lot of room left for regular kids who are absolutely extraordinary, but no one is fighting for them.
As we are the ones who can change the culture and the way we think about higher education in America. The only way to do that is to leverage the opportunities that we have available to us now, in the circumstances we are in now, but to also remember the many millions of students, not even just in this country, but around the world, who are probably just as deserving and qualified as you are, and don't have the opportunities that you do. Eventually, legal change will occur and members of our generation will come into office. But until then, it is up to us to know what is fair, what is just, and what is right. For we are the generation that can change, and we are the generation that will change.